right. Well, I mean, that was really it. I don't even think I have anything left to say. I appreciate you all having me here today. I'm excited to talk to all of you. I'm just going to stand here. Excuse my post-operative shoe. I broke my foot in a hula hooping accident. So if you hula hoop, be careful. So as you mentioned, my name is Sarah Starkey, and I am the Chief Legal Officer for the Larry H. Miller Company. And I'm here today to tell you a little bit about how I became an attorney, why I became an attorney, how I ended up with the Larry H. Miller Company, and what I do there. And then I'll let you all ask me some questions. And 35 for questions, right?
Yeah, 35 minutes for talking.
Oh, great, okay, perfect. Okay, so let's just start with why I became an attorney. So when people come to me and they say, Sarah, I'd like to become an attorney, and I ask them why, oftentimes people give, a variety of altruistic reasons, which are great. I want to help people. I want to help businesses be successful. I want to represent people who are being prosecuted by the government, those types of things. Those are all really great reasons to want to become an attorney. My story is nothing like that. So when I was in 7th grade, my biology class, of all things, was having a project on wastewater. And the biology teacher had a case study that he'd put together. And I was a very assertive child. I was very small. I was a very tiny child. And I was in 7th grade, so I was about 12 years old. And I went into the biology teacher and I said, biology teacher, I would like to be the lawyer. And he was like, Ms. Starkey, whatever you want, just do not send your mother down here. So he appointed me to be the corporate lawyer. I went home, I told my mother that I was going to be a lawyer in this case, and she needed to take me to the local law library, which is Gonzaga University. They have a basketball team now, but back then it was just a law school. And she took me there and I found some law students who were studying, and I accosted them in the library and I told them that I was a 7th grader working on a very important biology project and I needed their help. So they helped me to find a statute of limitations. So a statute of limitations is something that precludes an action from proceeding in either civil law or criminal law, right? It makes it so that the case cannot be brought forward because too much time has passed. You've allowed too much time to pass. Well, my poor biology teacher had written this case about 20 years ago. So I find a statute of limitations. The law students teach me how to write a motion to dismiss. And my mother picks me back up and I told her I was ready for my case, but first I needed an outfit from the mall because it was very important to me to have the right costume for whatever I was doing. Still is. And so I had her take me to the mall and I bought the most ridiculous like satin collared dress with, importantly, a beret and an overcoat and a briefcase. So it was obviously very popular in 7th grade. So I prepared my entire case and the day comes, we all go into the library, the entire school is there. I show up intentionally about 2 minutes late so that I can ceremoniously remove my beret and overcoat and set my briefcase down. I'm surprised I did not get beat up. So the biology teacher calls the case to order. He's the judge. And I stand up and I said, I'd like to make a motion to dismiss. And he said, what? And I went through my motion about the statute of limitations and he looked and he was like, Ms. Starkey, you're right. But for the benefit of the rest of the class, we have to proceed. And I was like, that's fine, as long as we're clear that I've already won. And he was like, yes, we're clear. So we proceed. I win anyway, because it's 7th grade and nobody else prepared or had a beret, right? So I was voted most likely to be a lawyer in my 7th grade yearbook. And I just took that and ran with it. I never knew a lawyer my whole life. I never talked to a lawyer. I never asked about being a lawyer. This is not the way to go. So you guys are already doing something better than I did. It's really important that if you're interested in being a lawyer, after my riveting speech that I'll give today about being a lawyer, to go and talk to some lawyers, to shadow some lawyers, to see what they actually do. Because I can tell you, first of all, it's not like my biology class, but it's also not like it is on TV. Being a, let's say, a civil litigation attorney, right? We've all watched Suits and Ally McBeal and all of those shows, right? Where a piece of litigation comes and you have a high-powered client, they come, they give you a case, and somehow 2 days later, it's all wrapped up and everybody's moved on with their lives. And there's lots of drama in the office too, to boot. Now, the outfits are real, but the rest of it is really not real. So it's a very slow moving process. If you wanted to be a civil litigator, most cases in civil litigation take anywhere between 3, if it's a small case, and 15 years if it's a large case. So you could be working on a case for the lion's share of your career. And you may start out as a first-year associate, and all you do is read case law and documents and help the senior associate. And you could stay on the same case all the way through a trial 15 years later and be the most senior associate or a partner on the case. So that's the reality of litigation. If you ever get yourself in litigation yourself, know that it's a long and grueling process. If you want to be a criminal lawyer, right? You watch the television shows, Law and Order. Again, it seems to be that you get a case, you go to court, it happens in one day and everything is wrapped up. That is not how it works. Typically criminal cases take, obviously there is an amendment that says we are all entitled to a speedy trial. Speedy is not very speedy in the more rational term that you might use. It could take, if you assert your rights to a speedy trial, could still take anywhere between 12 and 18 months. What's happening outside? So you get a case and you have many cases. And it may take many months and even years to come to fruition in a criminal trial as well. So those are kind of the two types of lawyers that everybody thinks about. And it's important to go and chat with some people, talk to them about their experiences, talk to them about law school. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about law school. So does everybody know how, if you wanted to become an attorney, how you become an attorney? I mean, you're already at step 3. You've graduated high school and you're in college. So you have to graduate college. And then you have to take the LSAT, and the LSAT is a standardized exam. It's very similar to the SAT, except it's 2 parts. It's vocabulary. There's no math because lawyers aren't expected to do math, which is great. My CEO told me the other day, I have no credibility with numbers, and he's not wrong. So, and there's these games. They're mind games, essentially. And it's something like, there's a man wearing a purple shirt, and there's 18 people on the bus. Where's the pig sitting? And those are all of the pieces of information that you have, which seem like there's no answer to it. But there is somehow a correct answer to it. So you take the LSAT, you go through a relatively rigorous application process, very similar to college, right? You have to write a personal essay, you have to submit your scores, those types of things. Hopefully you get accepted to law school, and then you go to law school. So I elected to go to an accelerated program in Los Angeles that was 1.5 years instead of 3 years. I like to do things fast. I do not like to sit idle very often. So it was 9 to 5, 8 hours a day. The teachers came to us to reduce the amount of time that we would have in between classes. And we did that. There was no holidays. I think we got Christmas Day off and Yom Kippur, but that was it. No summer vacation, nothing like that. A traditional law school program is 3 years long, and you typically go to class 3 days a week for about 3 to 6 hours per day, depending on the semester. You have finals every 6 months or every 3 to 4 months. And you go through a series of classes that teach you how to think analytically and critically. When you come out of law school, you're not necessarily prepared to be an independent attorney, although you can be. Once you pass the bar, you can hang your shingle. But really what you're doing is learning how to write like a lawyer and how to think like a lawyer, and all of the black law, it's called black law, the laws, right? All of the application of the laws that apply to a variety of different scenarios. So you route memorization of all of the different factors of civil procedure, criminal laws, business laws, contracts, torts, all of these types of things. I personally thought it was a very fun experience. It is very grueling, but you have to love to read and write. And I think that that's something that's very important, anyone who's considering being a lawyer, that you have to really, really love to read and write. And then law school will beat that out of you, and you will not like to read and write, but it'll come back a few years later, and you'll enjoy reading and writing again. But that's really a lot of what being a lawyer is, particularly at first. And I think it's important that people know that, because what the perception of being an attorney is, which is orating, right? Lawyers are always talking, they're orating before the court, they're talking to clients, they're doing all of this. But behind the scenes of all of that is a tremendous amount of reading and writing and analyzing documents and fact patterns and seeing how they all fit together. So once you graduate law school, then you have to sit for the bar. So I'm licensed to practice law in California and Utah. I sat for 2 different bars. California does not exercise reciprocity with any other state. So if you are an attorney there, you have to become licensed by taking a bar elsewhere. If you're licensed in a state like Utah, they have reciprocity with some of the other Mountain West states. So I could get a license in Wyoming. Wyoming and Utah get along better than Utah and California. Shocking. So once you are licensed to practice law, then you can become an attorney. You can apply for jobs, and the gentleman that was in here earlier, the professor, was talking about how he had his own business. You could start your own business. One of the things that I think is great about being an attorney is it gives you immediate credibility when you walk into a room. So no matter what you want to do with your life, being an attorney kind of gives you a bit of a step up to being that. Unless it's a mathematician, and then you have to convince people that you do in fact know how to do math, which is very difficult to do if you're an attorney and a mathematician. But so it really just gives you a lot of credibility. So that's why you'll see a lot of our politicians. A lot of politicians are attorneys, one, because ostensibly part of their job is to pass legislation. And in order to do that, you need to understand, one, how legislation is passed, but two, the kind of global impact of how the laws apply to one another and how they're layered in from a local perspective, state perspective, federal perspective, et cetera. So, but one of the other reasons is because it gives people credibility. If you are a business owner and people know that you are also an attorney, they may be less likely to violate the contracts with you because they're worried that you're going to sue you. I will tell you, it's hard to get a doctor's appointment, though. Doctors do not love to, with my broken foot, they don't love to see attorneys because they're also worried about getting sued. But attorneys do so much more than sue people. So I talked about civil litigation and criminal law. Now, what I do is none of those things. I'm a business lawyer. I oftentimes oversee litigation, but I don't spend my days in court, and I don't draft pleadings and do those types of things. So I came to Utah 12 years ago, but let me back up. So in Los Angeles, I was a high-end divorce attorney in Beverly Hills, which was interesting, but I decided that I did not enjoy the impact that my job was having on people's lives. It was a very personal type of law practice. So my job was to help people get divorced and to help people with their custody arrangements with their children, and to help people to split up their assets. The folks that I was working with generally had a lot of assets to split up, which to some degree was better because nobody was going to become homeless or become impoverished through the course of the divorce. But the emotional toll on the families was a lot, and I had to take that home with me. And I decided for myself that that really wasn't something long-term that I wanted to do because of just what I was having to deal with on a day-to-day basis with these families that were embroiled in trauma at that point in their lives. I did it for a couple of years, and it was a really, really good learning experience. But one thing that I learned how to do was work with high net worth individuals and families. And a job became open at the Larry H. Miller Company as a staff attorney. And I applied, and I came out and interviewed, and I was given the job, or offered the job rather, and I moved out to Utah. So that was about 12 years ago that I've been in Utah. And so I'm a business lawyer. So some of the things that I do on a day-to-day basis, I review all of our contracts. Anyone who is going to engage with us from a contractual standpoint, I review the contract to make sure that the provisions in the contract are fair, to make sure that we can uphold our side of the contract, and to make sure that what the other side is supposed to do, I know what they're supposed to do, and I can track it, and I can make sure that our business folks know, and that there aren't any hidden things contained in the contract, right? Where a couple of years later, we're going to have to spend an extra $200,000 because we failed to do this or they failed to do that. So I review all the contracts. I'm also in charge of all of our entities. So we have about 150 entities. It's not just one company. It is a series of companies, and most companies are. You're rarely dealing with a company that's a big company that's just one entity. So I am charged with forming the entities with the state of Utah, or if we're in another state, the state that we're in, getting the EIN numbers, which is the federal tax number that all entities have to have. And then also drafting up the corporate documents. So any entity that you're interacting with has either bylaws or certificates of origination. And those set forth the parameters of that entity, sort of like a contract, but an internal contract for an entity. And then if we have multiple shareholders, the shareholder agreement is the contract between the owners of the company. So I work on those with our shareholders to make sure that the terms are aligned with what the company needs to get done and what the shareholder needs to get done. So we form an entity, and then what do we do with it? So I also oversee all of our investments, mergers and acquisitions, and divestitures. So one of the things that that was on the list of things we can talk about is some business challenges. So I spent 10 years as the general counsel of our automotive group. I oversaw 65 dealerships from a legal perspective, all of our litigation, all of our M&A work, mergers and acquisition work, all of our licensing, customer complaints, all of those types of things. January 1st, 2020, I was promoted to the job I'm in now, which is the management company that oversees all of our portfolio companies. And for any of you who aren't really familiar with Larry H. Miller Company, we have pre-2022 a series of portfolio companies, which included an automotive group, the Utah Jazz, which we've sold both of those. And then we also have a finance company. We have a healthcare platform. We also have the Salt Lake City Bees, if you ever go to a Bees game. We also own Daybreak, if you're familiar with the master plan community out in South Jordan, yes. And Destination Homes, who builds houses both in Daybreak and all over the valley. And we are also involved in a variety of different investments in and around Utah, with small businesses, startups, things like that. So in 2020, I was promoted to the management company that oversees all of that, as opposed to being just embedded in my automotive portfolio. And when I was embedded in my automotive portfolio, I knew everything about the space. I'd been there for 10 years. I knew their issues. I knew all the laws that impacted them, all of the states that we were in, all of those types of things. And about 3 months later, so it was January 1st, March 11th, 2020, I get a text message from my, you're gonna have to work this backwards with yourselves, non-same-sex domestic life partner, my boyfriend of 20 years, who is the head of security for the Utah Jazz. And he texts me and says, they're taking us off the court and locking us in a locker room. And I said, oh, okay, let me go back upstairs, because I was leaving for the day. Now, mind you, I'm the lawyer for the company that owns the Jazz, and my partner is trapped with the Jazz in a locker room. So I go upstairs and we convene a meeting with the governor's team and our team, and we're trying to figure out how to get the Jazz out of Oklahoma City. And he's texting me saying, what are you guys doing? Help us. What are you doing to help? As my partner kind of getting irritated with me because I wasn't helping fast enough. And as the lawyer, I'm trying to tell him to calm down. So we ultimately get most of the team out, other than Donovan and Rudy, who tested positive, as is publicly reported. And he stayed home with me, or not home, he stayed back with them because he had to get them out of Oklahoma City and was going to rent a car maybe. Ultimately, he was able to fly back with Rudy sitting right next to him. This was before we knew much about COVID. So he came home and I made him live in the basement for a while. He never did get it. I think he's immune. But that was the beginning of COVID. And at that point in time, we had 11,000 employees, and I was both the chief human resources officer, interim, because we didn't have one at the time, and the chief legal officer. And everything was closing down and opening up and closing down and opening up. And I was in a brand new role. And as a lawyer, when you shift areas of law, everything is a bit different. So I was in a different area of law than I was accustomed to, with a bit of a different company structure, because I was situated up top of the structure as opposed to into the structure. Mind you, I hadn't backfilled my position yet, so I was still doing my job. And I had to, amidst a lot of panic, keep many people calm and develop and execute strategies that we could deploy to 11,000 employees in laying them off and bringing them back, depending on what any local order was, if we could be open that day or not, tracking all of that, and then putting together processes and procedures that each of the facilities could use to bring people back and forth. And one of the ways that I was able, and this was working a lot, right? I sat at my dining room table 20 hours a day. But one of the very important factors to me being able to do that is I had, over the course of time with this group of people that I was now leading, developed trust. So they trusted me as a leader to take them through this very difficult time in our company's history. I think in everybody's history, right? COVID was an interesting time for everybody. But I think the point of that, because I think you guys are talking about leadership, is that developing trust within your team and the people who either report to you or who are a customer of yours. So to me, everybody that I service within my company is a customer. They come to me for help and I provide them a legal service to help them with answers. That day-to-day building block of trust and always having integrity and always being honest with people and giving them the most informed advice that you can helps in times of crisis, so that people will look to you as a leader and rely upon your advice and processes that you're putting in place and proceed with what direction you're giving them when everybody needs to work together and there's a bit of a unknown and I will say panic, because it happens not just in a COVID arena, it happens from time to time in business. Things go wrong all the time and everybody needs to come together, and the leaders who are trusted are the people who are tapped to bring the company or the team through the crisis to the other side. But that trust has to be established beforehand. Otherwise, it's very difficult to step in and say, I'm going to lead you through this, please follow me, if people haven't already established that trust with you. So moving out of COVID, we start engaging in the process of selling the Utah Jazz. I had not been embedded in the Utah Jazz previously. I was an automotive group, so that was not the area that I knew the best. And one thing that I did at the very onset is I did research to find out who was the best outside counsel to handle sports-related divestitures. So I interviewed attorneys, we picked the best one, and I was able to rely upon that person to help me lead the transaction where we were selling the majority interest in the Utah Jazz and the arena and affiliated entities. So another just point there is sometimes you don't know everything. And it's very important to surround yourself with people who can give you access to information that you don't know already, or be a resource. So as an in-house counsel, I am fortunate enough to be able to hire outside counsel to help me with a variety of different things. Litigation, when we do transactions that are very, very large, I can't handle them in-house by myself. So it is important to be humble enough to say, I can't do that all on my own, or I don't have the knowledge base for that. I'm going to hire this person who I think is going to be the best person for this job to help assist and bring us through that. So that's another, I think, quality of a good leader is to be able to surround yourself with people who know things, but then also acknowledge when you don't know something and you need to bring in an outside resource. So this is now December 2020, which is when we sold our majority interest in the Utah Jazz. Imagine having to come home and tell my non-same-sex domestic life partner I'd been hiding that from him for months. When I was finally able to tell him, he was not super excited with me. But that's another part about being a lawyer. You are not allowed to, there's attorney-client privilege and there's confidentiality. So confidentiality is something that you agree to, right? Somebody will say you have to maintain the confidentiality of this. They may ask you to sign an NDA. Attorney-client privilege is something different. So as an attorney, as a licensed attorney, I have an obligation to my clients not to divulge non-public information that is attorney-client privilege. And the important piece to that is if I, or the client actually, divulge to a third party, the privilege is broken and we could be required to talk about what we talked about if we were subpoenaed or if there was some sort of litigation. So attorney-client privilege is very, very important, as is confidentiality. So as an attorney, you have to have trust and utmost confidentiality, but you also are required to maintain attorney-client privilege. So during the midst of this transaction, I could not take any of my Zoom calls or anything like that where Stephen could hear, because he's a smart guy, he would figure out what was happening. So I would have to make sure I was in the office. I couldn't tell him what I was working on. And he's used to that. He can't really tell me what he does. I can't really tell him what I do. But this was to a bit of a different level of really not being able to share that until the very, very end. So as an attorney, you have to hold confidentiality and privilege no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's your husband or your child or anything like that. Privilege is privilege. So that's another part of being a lawyer. So we ultimately sold the Utah Jazz, took a big deep breath, purchase day break, advanced healthcare, and then had the opportunity to divest ourselves of the second largest privately held automotive group in the country. This particular transaction was public, so I can talk about it a bit more, the particulars of it. So it was a $4.8 billion transaction, including the real estate. And I will tell you, most of the time on these transactions, I'm the only woman on the team of the lawyers, right? And I tell my outside counsel, when I'm hiring you, put together a team that has gender diversity, ethnic diversity, and all the diversities you can think of, or I am going to send it back to you and I'm not going to hire you. It's very important to me. I can't control the other side usually though. So on this, I typically will have at least one or two other women on outside counsel team because that's very critical to me, to help women in the law firms to work on big transactions and have meaningful work. And that's something that I can do to impact change in the law firms where it's a little bit harder to do. And at the end of the Jazz transaction, I had the woman who had been put on our team call me and thank me because she got to be on the team and had actual meaningful work. She wasn't just the note taker or something like that. So when you are in positions, leadership positions, it's important to keep an eye on the groups of people that are being presented to you from outside service providers and ask them to do better. So when you're the client, you can do that. You can ask them to try harder, do better, give you more diverse candidates to work with. And that's something that you can do when you're in positions, business positions, to kind of impact other businesses as well. And I think that that's important as a leader to move the ball forward and kind of proliferate that out. So that I think is important for me as well. So we sell the dealerships, and these are relatively large transactions. And as I mentioned about reading earlier, the purchase agreement for this particular transaction, I think, was about 250 pages long without the exhibits. And the reason I say that is because one thing that you have to do as a lawyer, if you want to be a lawyer at the end of this, is read the same document over and over again. So it's not just reading, it's reading with repetition and making sure that you have the mental focus to be able to find errors and to critically think about what you're reading, even though you read it a dozen times already, because each iteration is for the purpose of improving your client's position in the transaction. And it's challenging to do, and you have to step away and take a break sometimes. But it's part of being a transactional business attorney, is reading the same document over and over with fresh eyes to make sure that you give it the same analytical thinking that you did the first time. So I think some other important qualities from a leadership perspective are being kind. Everyone that you're working with is, generally speaking, trying their best. And it's important to give them an opportunity to succeed. And I always, if I'm frustrated with somebody that I'm working with and don't think that they're performing in a way that I'm asking them to, I always ask myself first what kind of direction I've given them and have I given them the tools to be successful and correct direction. Because a lot of times I will start a conversation in my head about a task, walk outside to the paralegal, mumble out the other half of what I was thinking, and then walk away. And she tries to piece together what I've meant. Now, my paralegal's really good at that because we've been working together for a long time. But if it doesn't come back with what I was envisioning, I always ask myself first, was that my fault? Did I give clear direction? And 90% of the time it was. And I also oversee all of our people and culture kind of issues. And when managers come to me and say, we'd like to terminate this person or write this person up, I ask them first for everything that they've done to help the person be successful and avoid what has been happening. Absent, they stop showing up to work. That's not the manager. But it's important as a manager and as a leader to give people tools and evaluate yourself and make sure you're providing people the tools that they need to be successful. And as an employee, it's also important to ask for the tools that you need to be successful and tell your manager, I need this from you. I need you to give me more clear direction on this in order to be successful and meet your expectations, and not be shy about those types of things. So. Questions?
I was wondering, What did you, with your bachelor's degree, what did you major in?
I majored in sociology with a minor in criminology, partially because I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, again, not having put a lot of thought into it, but that was what I was going to be, and I enjoyed sociology. So I found it to be a very enjoyable coursework for me during my bachelor's. Also, criminology was just very interesting to me, not because I wanted to become a criminal attorney, but just it was interesting coursework to me. I enjoyed the classes, I enjoyed the people, I enjoyed the department. I went to the University of Utah, by the way. Go Utes.
What led you to choose being a divorce attorney?
So that's a great question. So first out of law school, I worked for a small law firm, and we had a private client group. And the private client group basically took businessmen, and I say that because they were in fact all businessmen, who had inadvertently built businesses around something. So a rock quarry person who had developed a patent on how to crush the rock better, or a home builder who had inadvertently built a bit of an empire around his home building business. And what we would do is we would take those people and we would create structure for them. So we would form entities, we would get all the litigation together, we would draft employee handbooks for them because they didn't have those types of things. We'd get their estate plan together, we'd finish up their divorces. So I had this kind of broad-based background. And then September 2009 happened and the economy completely collapsed. And I was a first-year associate. And the firm went under almost immediately. I don't know what was happening. I was too new to know how their financials were, but it went under immediately. And I had no job. And I had a lot of student loan debt. So that's another piece of being a lawyer that's really important to me to make sure that people understand. If you go to law school and you come out of law school with a lot of debt, you have to be a lawyer to pay for the debt, regardless of if you want to be a lawyer. So one of the things I said is being a lawyer gives you a lot of credibility, and you can go do anything with a law degree. It gives you a step up to do anything. But if you've got $150,000 in student debt, you probably have to go be a lawyer so that you can earn a salary to pay for that. So I had student loan debt and I was terrified. And I spent like a week freaking out, and I think I learned how to iron for a second. I was like, I will iron sheets. I don't know, I was having a mental breakdown. And then I tried to get a job at Target because why not? And mind you, I was in Los Angeles, and the day that I lost my job, almost every first and second year associate in the broader Los Angeles County lost their job. All the finance bankers, all the Goldman Sachs people, all the JP, we were walking downtown. I remember it was around February when it really happened. And everyone's walking around with banker boxes. It was like the zombie apocalypse of new associates, right? And I didn't know what to do. So I printed resumes and cover sheets. I graduated first in my class from law school with a 4.2 GPA. I had a solid resume, and I printed out a lot of them, and I put on a nice outfit, and I went to Century City, which is in Beverly Hills, and it's probably 10 office towers. And I walked around to various law firms, and I had my packets, and I would ask to speak with the managing partner, and I would ultimately give my resume to the receptionist. And after hours of doing this, but it gave me something to do rather than sit at home. A woman came out and she was like, I was just talking about how I needed another associate, come back. And she was the named partner at the law firm. And it was this beautiful office. It was on the 32nd floor. You could see the ocean. It was all glass. It was an all-female firm, which was odd at the time. It still is probably odd. And she hired me on the spot for about half of what I had been making at my first job. But it was a job, and I was working again, and it was a really bad recession. I don't know how old everyone was in 2009, but it was a very tough time, and it was a very tough time to be a new graduate. I was a brand new graduate. So that's actually, it wasn't on purpose. It was out of necessity. And this was in the age of the internet, by the way. I don't know if you can tell how old I am, but I am as old as the internet. But the internet existed, and I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go walk around and see if I can get somebody to see me and talk to me and hire me to do something. So that's how I ended up at that firm.
What's the difference between a lawyer and an attorney?
Nothing. Semantics. And you know, it could have been in, you know, the 1800s, or a difference between British lawyers, you know, during the Revolutionary times and American lawyers. But now they're just interchangeable words. They have no difference and no distinction. Here in Utah, there are actually some, I'm glad you asked that because it's sort of off topic, but they have, in an effort to make access to justice more affordable, the Utah State Bar and the Supreme Court of Utah have been working on some initiatives to make it so that paralegals can practice certain types of law, very specialized types of law. One of them, I think, is family law. And I would not dissuade anybody from being a family attorney. I think being a family attorney is actually a really great profession. For me personally, it was too emotional. That's all. So if anyone is interested in being a family law attorney, it's fun, it's exciting, it's fast paced. You get to really, really help people in some of the toughest times of their life. It just wasn't for me.
Just so you guys know, Salt Lake Community College has the only paralegal program that's approved by the Bar Association in the state of Utah.
Yeah.
And our faculty members, two of our faculty members actually wrote the curriculum for the LPP, which is the intermediate paralegal between paralegal and lawyer level, where you can produce, it's property law, I think.
Yeah. I think there's some estate, family law, property law, and then maybe estate planning.
Yeah, are they gonna do immigration too?
I hope so. That would be really great.
Yeah, anyway, but some great areas of law where you could actually practice in the LPPs that are out there now, and there are only, I think, 13 of them in Utah. They're making bucks.
Yeah, it's actually,
they are so busy.
It's a really great option. And Utah's really, it's an innovative thing that Utah is trying to do. So hiring an attorney is expensive. And one of the reasons it's expensive is because lawyers went to law school, it costs them a lot of money, they've got to pay that back. I mean, it's this whole cycle, right? And law firms have a lot of overhead, they're notoriously expensive. And there are certain areas of the law where individuals who need access to justice typically do not have the funds to access that justice, right? And end up with a public defender, but public defenders are only available for criminal cases. If you need an immigration attorney, notwithstanding if you've actually fallen into the criminal part of the immigration system, you have to hire an attorney. You need a divorce attorney, or you need help with, you know, an abusive ex-spouse and your custody, you have to hire an attorney. You want to write a will, you can kind of do that on your own, but you have to hire an attorney. So these intermediary positions make it so that, first of all, it's much quicker than becoming an attorney. And there's a very specific area of law. So one problem that I see as people become lawyers is you don't actually graduate and know how to do anything. You don't specialize in something. You have to then go learn how to practice law. You learn how to think like a lawyer, but you don't know how to practice law. Whereas this curriculum, you learn how to do that portion of the law. You have a niche, you can go hang your shingle and advertise it. You're your own business owner, and you can immediately start really helping people in a very impactful way. And those types of, particularly those types of cases are a little bit more fast-paced. So you can see them to fruition and kind of get that satisfaction from helping people. So it's really great that Utah has done it. I'm glad there are 13. I hope next year there are 130, because there are many, many members of our community that could really use the additional access to justice and help.
The law firms are actually hiring the LPPs, a lot of them, because that takes the load off their attorneys, so that they can handle the more high value stuff, and the LPPs can handle this other stuff quite well.
Hopefully some of them stay out on their own so that they can keep their rates lower.
Is it the license, what's the LPQ stand for?
I think it's licensed legal practitioner.
Oh, yeah,
And so
LLP, yeah.
with the paralegal program, is that an associates that you're talking about here?
But yeah, the paralegal program is an associate, and the LPP is only another half a dozen classes.
Yeah.
And what I'm wondering is, does each individual attorney need a paralegal, or is that their
No.
choice?
No, So you can, if you're an attorney, you can have, no, I have a paralegal and a legal assistant. Just to help with paperwork and volume of stuff. At a law firm, there will typically be one paralegal for every 5 attorneys or something like that. Litigation, you need a paralegal a little bit more, but no, there's no technical need for a paralegal. You do not have to have a paralegal ever or an assistant. You can handle everything on your own. If you work for a law firm, one of the benefits is you have access to a paralegal and a legal secretary to do. I don't think it happens quite as much anymore. It used to be back in the day. I'll tell you a story that is demonstrative of this. At the family law office that I worked for, I came into the office one morning and the attorney was kind of storming around and she was upset about something. And it was because there was no one there to make a copy for her. She needed to make a copy. And I said, oh, I can make the copy. I know how to use the copy machine. And she turned and she screamed at me that lawyers don't make copies. We don't pay you to make copies. You shouldn't know how to use the machine. And I was like, I get that. I'm not making copies, don't worry, but I do know how to use the copy machine. But she wouldn't let me make the copy because I wasn't supposed to make a copy. But I think that we've kind of gone away from that, I hope. But it also used to be that we weren't supposed to type. We had to dictate everything into a tape recorder, and then you would give it to your legal assistant, and your legal assistant would type everything. I don't know anyone that still dictates their memos or their emails. I mean, you can't dictate emails, that's inefficient. So there's been a bit of a shift away. Still a lot of help with copies, mailing, finding files, that kind of thing. But it's more substantive work than typist and making copies, because lawyers can make their own copies and type now.
So probably everyone get in trouble for having help. And Larry Schiller, he's just, I don't want to take time.
But did you have, either one, we have time.
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, would you say there's still like a demand for lawyers? And second question, how do you feel, or like, do you see a difference in like how lawyers used to be and how it's like more online through Zoom now?
Yeah. So there is absolutely still a demand for lawyers. We had 3 large firms come into town last year and hired a lot of the lawyers. A lot of the bigger mid-sized firms are scrambling to get lawyers. There's absolutely a need for lawyers, yes. And there are a lot of needs for lawyers in kind of the places where we were talking about immigration, criminal justice, those types of things. But at a corporate level, corporate lawyers, nobody has enough lawyers right now. Work as far as lawyers are hard to come by. Yes, everything about lawyering has changed from, we no longer, dictate, I type everything myself, make my own copies. Don't know how to use the FedEx machine. I will admit, I don't know how to use the FedEx machine, but other things that have changed kind of post-pandemic, the law firms had to allow these associates to start working from home because of state orders. And a lot of them have kind of stuck with Zoom. Court happens via Zoom still a lot of court hearings. You're starting to see it come back. I personally think some of the things need to happen in person. I don't like I've been participating in some of the bail hearings, bond hearings, and although I think bond hearings are good to actually have online because you can process people faster and hopefully get them out of jail faster if they are entitled to bond. But some of the, particularly in the criminal justice system and the family court system, I think it's more beneficial to have people in person because a lot of deals are struck in the hallways of the courthouses amongst the lawyers, and it really takes away that person-to-person contact and the humanity behind some of the issues that are dealing with people's livelihoods as opposed to people's businesses. People's businesses are very important, but there's just kind of less human-to-human necessity at the courthouse. As far as Zoom is concerned from a business perspective, I interact with, I'm not having my lawyers drive from downtown to come meet with me. We can have a Zoom call. And the technology is evolving so quickly that our conference rooms are getting better and everything. So yes, there's a lot more usage of technology in the law to make lawyers' work-life balance a lot better.
What are the common law problems that are set up and needed to encounter at the beginning?
Sorry, I missed the second half.
What common laws problems setup need to encounter at the beginning, like in the corporate?
Oh, at the beginning, yeah. So at the very beginning, you have to have a corporation, right? LLC corporation, decide what type of company you want to have. The purpose of a company is to protect the owner from the liability of the company. It's not a perfect system if the company is not capitalized properly. There's something called piercing the corporate veil, and that allows the liability to flow back through to the owner and disassembles the corporate structure. But you have to have a corporate structure. You have to have an EIN number. And that's what the Secretary of State of Utah is how you form an entity. You do it online. It's, I think, $10. It's actually great. Some states are terrible. California, it costs a ton of money. It takes forever. Delaware costs like $300 and takes forever. So Utah is actually really great for forming an entity. You can file a DBA. So I have an entity called, I'm just making this up, Sarah Starkey Inc., but it's DBA. Sarah Starkey is a lawyer, something like that. So you can file a doing business as, and that's your consumer facing name. And that's $7. You file that on the Secretary of State. If you're operating something where people are going to interact with you, you have to get insurance. If you're going to have a business, you have to, like an operating business, you have to get a business license in the city that you're in. If you're going to have a restaurant or something like that, there's a whole host of different licenses. So it kind of depends on the business. But the very baseline is, what kind of business do I want to be? Sole proprietor, partnership. You don't have to do anything to be a sole proprietor. Partnership, you have to form an entity, either a limited partnership or an LLC. An LLC, limited liability company. You can have multiple members. Those are some of the most flexible types of entities. Highly recommend. Corporation, and if you're a corporation, you can either be an S Corp, which flows through all of the profits to the owners, or a C Corp, which sticks all of the profits in the corporation. And if you take them out, you get taxed twice. Only do that if you're a big company. And that's with the IRS. You make a selection. So if you form a corporation, when you file your EIN number with the IRS, you have to make an S election. Otherwise, you're automatically a C Corp, which is probably not where you want to be. And you had one more, yeah. Something about Larry.
My other class is marketing, and my professor worked with Larry H. Miller for years. And I just, I've seen his business grow in the dealership. I lived in Bountiful when they built the first dealership. Oh, it's in Bountiful now instead of just Salt Lake. And then when he passed, how it was just heart-wrenching I remember watching the news, and his, wife and son were trying to decide what to do. But she was making the point yesterday at what a trustworthy man he was and how he helped people, and that there was she said there was a family an employee that his employee passed away from heart problems, and that he took care of their children, that they were able to have a college scholarship, and that he really gave back to the community. And I think that by giving, you become successful. And obviously he was a wonderful man, a good businessman that helped.
And that's important. So our company mission is to enrich lives. And whether that's from philanthropic giving, scholarships, there are many students here on their H and Gail Miller scholarships. There's a Miller campus. There's scholarships at the University of Utah for first generation students. There's scholarships for our employees' dependents. And Gail's building a hospital out in Lehigh. There's a lot of philanthropic things, but also in building businesses. So when you start a business and build a business and employ people and provide them with meaningful work for meaningful wages, that is enriching their lives. And then it grows from there, right? Then they're able to go be members of the community where they'll spend their dollars, and maybe they start a business and a variety of different things. So our mission is to enrich lives through everything that we do, and that flows from the top down every single day, every decision that we make. And our mission is to be the best place in town to work and the best place in town to do business. So we have a ton of different businesses in healthcare, in finance, corporate, real estate. If anyone's out looking for jobs, it is a really great place to work with a great, our patriarch Larry, who did pass away, his widow Gail is in charge of the company. And if you don't know about Gail Miller, look into Gail Miller. She's quite possibly the nicest human on the planet, and does everything she can to give back to this community and to make Utah a better place.